Our next topic would be about elements, compounds, and mixtures. First of all, let's look at uh, what are elements. Here. Before going into the detail of elements, we need to know that atoms are the smallest particle of matter, something we cannot break down further by chemical means. You see, single atoms are far too small to see. For example, uh, if you see a full stop right here, if I draw it, perhaps a million sodium atoms would fit in a line across this specific full stop. So you can see sodium only if there are enough sodium atoms together in one place. If you look at this drawing, let's say there is a nucleus in the center, and this overall is an electron cloud. And you can see that each if you simply see this drawing, it shows how a sodium atom might look like magnified many millions of times. Each atom would contain a nucleus in the center and a cloud of particles called electrons that simply whiz around it. They are electrons which are moving freely. Now let's specifically look at elements. Now if we specifically look at what are elements, always remember that element contains only one kind of atom. It cannot contain different kinds of atoms. Let's look at the example of element sodium. In sodium, this element is made up of only sodium atoms. So therefore it can be defined as an element. If there were different types of atoms present in sodium, then this could not be called an element. If you again look at it, sodium is considered to be an element because it contains only one type of atom, only one type, not multiple types. So therefore it can be considered as an element. Now let's look at what are compounds. Remember that a compound is made of different atoms A compound is made of atoms of different elements bonded together. The compound is specifically described by a formula made from the symbols of the atoms in it. Let's look at some examples. A compound is water. It has two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen. It looks something like this. Now these two atoms of hydrogen are bonded to the atom of oxygen with a covalent bond. We will look into the types of bonds at a later stage, such as covalent bonds or ionic bonds or metallic bonds. But here I am just trying to tell you that atoms are bonded together to form a compound. Another example would be of carbon dioxide, which is CO2. Carbon atoms are bonded with oxygen atoms to form a compound of carbon dioxide. Now let's look at the difference between a compound and a mixture. In a compound, as mentioned earlier, atoms of different elements or same elements are bonded together with a covalent bond or an ionic bond. But in a mixture, the mixture contains different substances that are not bonded together. So you can usually separate the substances quite easily using methods that we have discussed earlier. Let's say that there is a mixture of water and it has sand in it. You have water and you have sand. If you want to separate sand from water, what you would simply do is that you can pour this into a filter funnel which contains a filter paper. You can place it over a beaker. You can pour it. What will happen is that after you pour it through the filter funnel, sand particles would remain in the filter paper as the residue, and water will contain in the other beaker as your filtrate. Now another example of a mixture would be that of iron powder and sulfur. Let's say you have a china dish and in which you have powder of iron and sulfur. You have iron powder, you have sulfur powder. You can easily separate them by dissolving the sulfur in methyl benzene, which is a solvent. Remember that methyl benzene is a solvent. And after dissolving the sulfur in methyl benzene, you can simply filter iron.